right. I just want to thank everybody for showing up to today's webinar, Taste of Motivational Interviewing, being presented by Trevor Manfee. Just a quick housekeeping note. Any CRC credits will be sent to you via email at the end of the webinar. And without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Trevor.
All right, welcome everyone, and I'm excited to be here and to speak with you and conduct a webinar on motivational interviewing. This is something that I've been doing for a long time now and am passionate about, and it's something that gives me a lot of drive, and hopefully you'll find that you enjoy it also. And it's good to start out with talking a little bit about expectations or kind of what you expect to get out of a training like this around motivational interviewing, because motivational interviewing is a skill set. It's not something that you can get from an hour and a half. It's pretty complicated. It's a large skill set, so that's why this is a taste of motivational interviewing. And to develop the actual skill set, you would need more in-person type of interactions, more kind of ongoing coaching and training. And so that's something to keep in mind. So don't expect to be the judo chop amazing motivational interviewer by the end of an hour and a half webinar. The other thing, just a little bit of personal information about me, is that I tend to like interaction. I'm someone who really enjoys that and tries to do that. And there's limitations with what we can do over the webinar format for interaction. So with that, what I'd like to do is have each of you, because sometimes people take webinars because they're in positions where they can't do a lot of interaction and talking and things like that. So what I'd like to do is get your permission in the chat box function. You'll see a place to type messages in the webinar format there. And you can type a message. And what I'd like you to do is just, I know that there's 9 or 10 of you in the enrolled here. If you would just type your name, your first name, and then type a yes or a no about whether or not you would be willing to have me call on your name periodically and ask you about your experience. Not a quiz question, but just kind of like, what has been your experience with this thing? And you can just share your personal experience fairly quickly so that we can target questions for people. And that helps us avoid talking over each other, but it still allows some interaction in this webinar format. So if you're willing to do that, it would be great if each of you could just kind of type your first name really quick and then yes or no about whether or not you would be willing to have me ask you questions every once in a while, probably just a couple throughout the webinar about what your experience has been with certain things. So go ahead and do that, and I'll just wait a second if you don't mind, and you can just type into that chat function your name and then whether or not you'd be willing to have me ask you a question periodically. Yes or no, and there's no judgment either way. So. Thanks, Miley. Thanks for responding there. Sonic, Miley, Kelly, Kendra. All right, no worries. And just to clarify around experience, if, hi, Anita. Good to have you on here, Anita. Um, so if excellent. So with that, this it's it'll be fine for us to just go along like that, and that'll help. This will helps me actually target how we're going to go from here. So this is really good to help me adjust how we'll do things. So with this, we'll start out and we'll just talk about what motivational interviewing is and have a basic idea about uh, what it, uh, what motivational interviewing is. And so that's why it's called a taste of MI. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to start out with talking about a little bit of how it was developed. Motivational interviewing is different than a lot of other interventions in that it wasn't developed through it wasn't developed by this top-down approach. A lot of times, you know, if you've been involved with uh, universities, or if you, when you were getting your degree, you probably noticed things like this happening at schools or in academia, where people would come up with this grand theory about why people change, and they would say things like, you know, they'd come up with, this is why I think people change. This is my big idea. This is my big theory about why people decide to change their behavior. And then they develop some sort of intervention and test it to see if it would work. And it's a very kind of top-down approach that way. Motivational interviewing was a little bit different in that it was part of how it was developed was by William Miller uh, being involved in kind of these fishbowl activities where people would actually watch him through two-way glass or through other sorts of observation and watch him work with people with substance use issues in the moment. And then afterwards, they'd ask him questions, and they'd ask him things like, you know, why did you state that in that way? Or why did you summarize that? Or what was the purpose of that open-ended question? Because that seemed to really work well, but that other thing that you said didn't work well at all. And so that's part of what occurs then, is that, you know, people is that people started asking William Miller why he was doing things, and it's really interesting to hear what he says after that. William Miller says, they forced me to pay attention to what was working and what wasn't working, and then they started paying even closer attention and really noticing what seemed to help people talk themselves closer towards change and what seemed to help people talk themselves away from changing. And they started keeping track of the behaviors that seemed to help. And then they combined all those behaviors together and called it motivational interviewing. And so it's this practice-based wisdom, kind of the pragmatic, in-the-moment conversational strategies that seem to help people talk themselves into changing in a good way. And that's what how MI was developed. It's very much a bottom-up approach, which is really refreshing in that way. It's very different from the way a lot of things are developed in academia, particularly in sometimes in psychology. So that's pretty neat. And because of that, there's a lot of theories associated with motivational interviewing. It's different than some other interventions where there's one primary theory. In motivational interviewing, people have associated a lot of different theories with why it seems to work. And one of those is self-determination theory. And that is this idea that we all like to be the drivers of our own boat. We all like to be in control of our own lives. And so because of that, when we are told what to do, we feel like people are not allowing us to drive our boat. When our autonomy is taken away through our social context, that we don't like that. We get upset, we fight against it, and we don't like that. And so motivational interviewing is something that works with people's self-determination rather than against it. And we inadvertently do that all the time as helpers, is we inadvertently work against people's self-determination rather than with it. And so that's one of the theories attached to it. One of the other things then is that uh, motivational interviewing isn't the end all be all. There's a lot of things that it does really well, but it isn't the only thing that you will use. And so I'm not going to be someone who tells you that, yes, this is the thing that you should use right now, and it's going to solve all your problems. Absolutely not. It'll be something, even William Miller describes MI as something that at the highest levels of learning it, you know how to move smoothly into it and how to move smoothly out of it, and there'll be times when it's appropriate and times when you'll be doing other things. And so to keep that in mind. So sometimes we feel this way. Sometimes we feel like we're stuck between a rock and a hard place, and we're trying to help people make behavior change. And so because of that, we have our carrots and our sticks. And we have our reward systems and our consequences, and we're trying to help people make changes. So if I'm a counselor and I'm working with a client, I'm often, maybe I'm saying, okay, I've got to get them to, follow through on this or return this form or make this change. And so I start to get burnt out because I pull out my carrots and my sticks, and I'm doing everything that I can to help them in the best that I know how, but it's not working, and I start to burn out a little bit. And MI may be that better way. Recently, William Miller and Stephen Rolnick put together or came out with the third edition of the Motivational Interviewing book, and they have 3 definitions in this new book, and that's for a reason, and that's because it's based on how you're defining motivational interviewing. So there's a simple definition, there's a more pragmatic definition, or kind of a kind of a problem statement definition, kind of a practical definition. That's what that second one is. And then there's a third definition on the next slide that's a more technical definition about motivational interviewing. And I'll just kind of read through these because it gives you a sense of different ways to think about motivational interviewing if we were to just define it, about what it is. So a basic definition, kind of a simple one, is that motivational interviewing is a collaborative conversation style for strengthening a person's own motivation and commitment to change, which I like. That's a pretty good definition about what motivational interviewing is and is meant to do. The next one is more of a, what kind of problems does it address? What does it help with? And so kind of that practical definition. What is MI meant to help with? So motivational interviewing is a person-centered counseling style for addressing the common problem of ambivalence about change, which is so true. We all experience ambivalence. We all feel 2 ways about things. We all feel, if we just think about our own diet and exercise, part of me really wants to do it, and the other part of me goes, donuts, right? And so that's just the nature of being ambivalent. And so MI is meant to help people, resolve that ambivalence about when they're stuck in that place in the middle, feeling 2 ways about a behavior change, and increase their motivation for having that happen. This third definition is a more technical definition. It's the how-to definition. Motivational interviewing is a collaborative, goal-oriented style of communication with particular attention to the language of change. It is designed to strengthen personal motivation for and commitment to a specific goal by eliciting and exploring the person's own reasons for change within an atmosphere of acceptance and compassion. So I really like that. It really emphasizes the collaborative nature of things, that you're paying attention to how people are speaking, what they're saying, and the language of change. And there's a lot of implications for that, which we'll jump into here in a minute. So really, yeah, motivational interviewing is this kind of collaborative, person-centered style, and there are specific strategies and things and ways you'll go about things to help people do that. That last little statement at the end of this slide is powerful to me, and I really like that idea. It's a simple way to think about it, but I think it captures a part of the essence of MI there, and that you are arranging conversations so people talk themselves into changing. You're not telling them how to change. how to change or why to change. You're arranging the conversation and you're developing a skill set so that people talk themselves into it. And that's a powerful concept. So with this, I want you to think about a personal change that you have tried to make in your life. If you just think about something that you've been ambivalent about in your life, a diet, exercise, weight loss, smoking, something that you've tried to change, I just want you to put yourself in that space for a minute and just think about a few things. What was it like when that light bulb first goes off in your head? Oh man, this is an issue for me. I didn't realize this was an issue for me, but this really is becoming one. And then, what was that like for you? What was that experience like? Um, and then maybe later on, maybe you're in this place where you're going, I'm feeling two ways about this. I really want to work out, but this is hard, and the idea of being on a treadmill, that's just ridiculous. That's the last thing I want to do. But man, if I keep going this way, then maybe I'm going to develop diabetes like my parents. Like, what is it like for you to be there? Um, and just put yourself in those challenges because that's really what our clients face. And the next part of this then, mental exercise, and just kind of take a minute and think about this. But I'd like you to also think about what age you were. What age were you when you first realized that this topic for you was an issue? How old were you? You can write this down if you're at a place where you have a corner of a sheet of paper or something. You can write this down, or you can just think about it in your head. But how old were you when you first realized that diet or exercise or smoking or whatever other behavior change issue that you're thinking about is? How old were you when that first became an issue for you? And then I want you to think about how old you were when you actually made the change. How old were you when you actually made that change? And then note the difference, the length of time between the two of those ages. And I'm betting that for some of you, it might have been fairly quick, 6 months to a year maybe. And then for by far the majority of you, you're going to be saying things like 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. People have said things up to 14, 50, 20 years. Sometimes it's a long time, and that's the nature of changing. Sometimes you'll be really good at it. I'm really good at my diet. I'm really good at eating more healthy. And then there'll be other times where you're totally off off the wagon and just not healthy at all, and just and it moves back and forth, and sometimes you're doing great, sometimes you're not, and so that's the thing. Change isn't easy. Change isn't easy at all. And I've seen different things in different trainings I've done. Some people I've seen where they just started crying. I remember one woman in particular. She was in one of the closer rows, and she started crying, and she raised her hand, and she asked to be called on, of course. So I called on her, and she said, that it was almost like she was having a crisis of her profession. And she was like, I've been trying to make this change, which is relatively simple compared to the changes that my clients are trying to make. And yet I still haven't been able to do it, and it's been over 10 years. Whereas, the things that I'm asking my clients to do are way harder, more difficult than what I'm trying to do. And yet, I'm asking them to do it in, 90 days, 120 days, like to make these really major life changes, and multiple ones in a really short amount of time. And it was almost like the light bulb went off, and she was like, no wonder, no wonder I'm burning out, right? And that's just the nature of change. And if we personalize that, it's easier to see from their perspective what's going on. And that's the idea. The nice thing about MI, though, is that it can help speed up that process. It can help it go faster. And so that's part of what we'll get into. There are some things, though, that we want to avoid when we're doing motivational interviewing. And these are what we like to call roadblocks. They're things that we naturally veer towards. There's things that actually get in the way of doing good motivational interviewing, good communication strategies. And we all have them. We all have these natural things that get in the way for us that are difficult. So what I'd like to do here is I'm going to pull up this next slide, and this is kind of a list of some of the things that get in the way of being able to do good motivational interviewing. And this is called Thomas Gordon's 12 Roadblocks. And Thomas Gordon is a student of Carl Rogers. And while I tell you about Thomas Gordon, what I'd like you to do actually is look at this list and see if there's any of the ones that you fall into. And if there are, what I'd like you to do is type into either the question box or the chat box or someplace just the number, like number 1 or number 3 or number 10 or number 5 or whatever one that you think you fall into. But just kind of do some self-assessment and go, yeah, these are the ones that I tend to fall into. These are ones that I struggle with. For instance, for me, I have one of mine, my favorite ones when I'm not paying attention to it is persuading with logic. It's one of my favorites. So what I'd like you to do is to think about what are some of the roadblocks that you fall into. And I'll tell you a little bit about Thomas Gordon while you think that through and type that in. But Thomas Gordon was a student of Carl Rogers, who's of course the person-centered practice guru. And so one of the things that Thomas Gordon did for Carl Rogers was listening to audio tapes when Carl Rogers was trying to coach other people on doing person-centered work. And he made a name for himself by noticing these roadblocks. These are things that he noticed got in the way of good communication, got in the way of people being more real, having honest, true conversation with each other. And this got in the way. And these are also things that can get in the way of motivational interviewing. So I noticed that that Millie put in number 10, reasoning and sympathizing. Yeah, that can be a roadblock for sure, because maybe you're really trying to reason with them, almost use that kind of reasoning approach, or sympathizing as opposed to empathy, where you're feeling bad for them, as opposed to empathy, where you're really trying to put them in each other's shoes. For sure, that can be a roadblock. I also noticed that Tiffany put 3 and 10, and agreeing, approving, and praising. Oh, that's a great one, Sonia. So let's talk about 3 for a second, because that's one that is so common. I think almost all of us fall into that to one degree or another. We're giving advice, making suggestions, providing solutions, and that doesn't work as well. And for some specific reasons, that those solutions are then coming from us. And often we get into this dynamic where we're trying to provide them with solutions and advice, and they're just batting all our ideas out. And that's really kind of a bummer. So that one's so common. And we do that because we care, right? We care about them. And then number 7's a good one too. Anita threw that one out, and so did Tiffany. Oh no, it was it was Sonia. That one is a really good one too. Around, sometimes we're agreeing, approving, and praising, but it comes across disingenuous, like we're a cheerleader, or maybe we're agreeing with something or approving something, but it's something that we really don't want them to do again. Maybe we're not being careful about what it is that we're approving or agreeing or praising. So yeah, those are really, really great ones. And then 11 also, questioning and probing. Yeah, how we use questions, how we probe, absolutely can be roadblocks. They can get in the way, and so that's something that we really want to be careful of, and trying to avoid those rapid fire close questions, probing, as opposed to really listening to and drawing out from the other person using some other more open-ended questions and evoking strategies. So absolutely. So these are all things that can get in the way, and there's some other things that can get in the way too. And a lot of these fall into some specific categories. I'm gonna jump past that and go straight to here, which is what we call the writing reflex. We feel like we have to write things, and a lot of these issues from Thomas Gordon fall into this category where we're trying to fix it. So a lot of us have probably seen a crooked picture on the wall. If we're in someone's house and we notice that the picture is crooked, we're going, I gotta fix that. I gotta fix that picture on the wall. It's crooked. Everything in your body is saying, that's not right. I gotta fix that. And that's the same thing that happens to us maybe internally when people come to us with a problem. Hey, I've got this problem. It's this giant jellyfish, and they come up to you, and it's this just big, nasty, giant jellyfish, and they drop this problem jellyfish in your lap, and then look at you and say, all right, fix it, fix it, and then your then internal response is to go, okay, well, what about this or what about that? Have you tried this? Have you tried that? What about doing this? And it doesn't. And then what they end up doing is just batting out all of your ideas. They're saying, well, I don't like this one. I don't like that one. I don't like this one. And so that writing reflex then tends to get in the way. So we say, why don't you want to make a change? And we just start asking them all these questions, making suggestions, trying to fix it from an external point of view. And that's the writing reflex. And that approach doesn't work because of something very powerful. And that's that it causes the two people to actually act out the sustained side of their ambivalence. So remember when we were talking about ambivalence earlier from your own personal perspective, and we were describing some of the ways, what is it like to want to work out and yet have this thing on the other side that's saying, that's the last thing I want to do. We live, when we're ambivalent about something, we live in that space. And it's like we have two realities at once. Part of us really wants to make that change. Part of us really wants to go back to work. Part of us really wants to do that. And yet there's this other side of us that's saying, but I don't know that I can. My back hurts. I don't know that my disability will allow me to. My mom's relying on my SSI check. There's all of this ambivalence that's going on. But I do want to get out of the house. I'd like to feel, normal again. All of these things that people talk about when they're thinking about their ambivalence about going back to work. And when we fall into the writing reflex, we can almost see it work like clockwork. What they hear themselves say is all the reasons why your ideas aren't going to work. And that's what that sustained side of their ambivalence is. It's the desires, abilities, reasons, and needs to stay the same. And what the research seems to show is that the more that people hear themselves say that side, the bigger and more real that side becomes for them internally, and we've just increased the likelihood that they're not going to change. And they're talking themselves away from it. And that's such a bummer because we care. That's why we fell into the writing reflex in the first place. We care about them. We want them to do good things. We want them to be able to make changes. And so we give them advice. And that's what this little cartoon talks about here. So here's our counselor who's fallen into the writing reflex. Well, or have they tried? Well, what about trying if you just do? And then there's this other guy over here that's saying, you think I haven't thought or tried these things already? Like, really? That's what he's thinking internally. And then, here's our client that then they look at you and say, but I don't want to do that. Well, when they say that, what are they hearing themselves say? They're talking themselves away from changing their behavior. And we've inadvertently caused that by falling into that writing reflex. And then in our heads, we're kind of going, dang, fixing the problem was part of my job description. Now what do I do? And so we get caught into this catch-22 place. And so what MI is meant to do is help us get out of this trap and help people talk themselves into it instead of away from it. And that writing reflex actually causes people to talk themselves away from it. So here's a little video that I think is going to capture this really well. So yeah, Andrew, I'm gonna mute myself just real quick while I. There we go.
It's just, there's all this pressure.
So I really like that. I really like that video in that it really captures the dynamics that go on when we fall into that writing reflex. And we've probably both been in those scenarios where we have, uh, we have these feelings like, man, I just want to help this person out. It looks like they've got it just seems like they've got a nail in their head. They've got this nail in their head, and I just want to fix it for them. And that's coming from the best of intentions, and yet what the other person hears is different than what we're meaning. And the same thing goes in reverse. We've all been the person with the nail in our heads, and we are experiencing these things, and it bothers us a little bit. And so we get to that place, uh, and we go, man, what's going on here? Um, and so we get frustrated with that because the other person is just telling us what to do. So the idea from a motivational interviewing perspective is we're going to get out of that dynamic, excuse that, and try other things. So up to this point, we've been talking about some things that we want to avoid in motivational interviewing. And from this point forward, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about, well, instead of these things that we're trying to avoid, what are the things that we're going to be doing instead? And I really like this sheet because it's kind of an overview of the different processes of MI. And what you'll see here is that there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of different things that you can practice and learn. And so this is a good overview of those things that we're going to be trying to do instead. And so this is a diagrammed overview of MI strategy. With this, it's broken up into 3 sections. There's the one, if you are looking, you'll see on your left there, that is the MI spirit category, which is all the way over on the left. That you could envision that as a column there on the left. Then there's the middle section, which is the micro skills. And then there's the section over on the right, which is the 4 processes of MI. And we're going to go over each one of these in detail. And I'm going to kind of give you the brief overview here, and we'll, as we move forward, we'll talk about each of these sections, of course, in a more nuanced way. So the first section there is the spirit of MI, and this is really kind of the art section of MI. I like splitting this up into the art. The spirit section is really the art part, and the micro skills and the 4 processes of MI, that's the science part. There's a lot of science involved in there, and how we weave them together and stuff, there's art to that too, but primarily a good way to think about it is the spirit of MI is the art, and the micro skills and 4 processes, that's a lot about the science. And so the art part really is, how the conversation should feel. How it should drive the conversation, what's the point of the whole conversation in the first place, and how it should feel. So So with that is we want to have that equal partnership, help them feel accepted, have some compassion, have compassion for them and their situation, and evoke from within as opposed to telling them what to do. So that's the spirit of MI. In the middle, we have the micro skills, and the micro skills are often called OAR skills, open-ended questions, affirmations, reflection, summary, statement, under that acronym's OARS, O-A-R-S. And so these are skills that we can learn and really develop well with different strategies, different ways to use questions, different strategies for reflections, different ways to use summary statements, all of these things that we can get really good at and practice in a lot of different ways and get really good with a bunch of different strategies, like a ton, and get really good at. And then once we get really good at those, we start asking ourselves, well, how do I prioritize? How do I use? What is my strategy? Once I've gotten these skill sets down really well, how do I prioritize how to use that? Well, then there's 4 processes in the motivational interviewing, in motivational interviewing. And there's engagement, and this is in the column on the right-hand side. There's engagement, focusing, evoking, and planning, and you can use your OAR skills differently with different strategies overall than in each one of these 4 processes. And so you will use your OAR skills differently when you're in each of those 4 processes. Slightly differently. So your strategies will be a little bit different. And then you ask yourself, well, how do I know? How do I know what process I should be in? Well, it's what type of language are you hearing? Are you trying to build a relationship because maybe you're hearing some discord from them, or are they wandering off topic? Are they ambivalent? Am I getting the sustain and change talk that would be evoking? Or maybe they're feeling more, that language is more firm. Well, then we're going to move into planning. And I know that this is a lot in one slide, so don't worry about trying to take that all in now. We're going to go into the details, and it'll feel better here in a little bit. But that's the big picture of MI strategy, and we'll be referring back to this kind of big picture slide a few times as we go through this Taste of MI process. So there's the art part, which is the MI spirit, and then there's the science side, which is the micro skills and the 4 processes. And getting good at both of those is important. So let's start with the spirit of MI. What are we trying to do with the spirit of MI? How should the conversation feel? And there are metaphors that I like to use to describe some of this. And so here's the spirit of MI. And if you've been to other motivational interviewing training or had experience with it before, this acronym used to look different. But this is from the latest book here, and so here's the current acronym for the spirit of MI. The first, metaphor that I like to use is this idea of dancing versus wrestling. What's the whole point of wrestling? Well, to win. If you're feeling like you have to win by the end of a conversation with someone, you're probably not doing motivational interviewing. You're doing something else. But if it feels more like a dance, like you're having this collaborative dance, that it's an equal relationship, that things are going well in that way, then you're more likely doing motivational interviewing. So you want to have that equal partnership, that equal collaborative relationship. That's what you want to have feeling. This next idea is this idea of acceptance, that we're accepting them for who they are and their circumstances with what's going on. And there's 4 A's in this acceptance principle. And I use a couple of different metaphors to describe this. I use the intimate personal relationships to describe this one. We have all been in intimate personal relationships that haven't gone well. And we've all been in intimate personal relationships probably that have gone well. And sometimes that's with the same person. But I'm going to take you to the negative place first. So let's just say that in our personal lives with our spouse or our partner or a significant other, there are times when they don't accept us warts and all, that they don't appreciate who we are, that they want us to change, and they want us to change for them. They don't have that absolute worth going on of us, and in fact they want us to change for them, so they're not even supporting our autonomy. And they don't have accurate empathy for why we bring the baggage that we bring, that they don't want us to do that. They just want us to change, and they want us to change for them. In fact, they're not even affirming our strengths, the things that we do well, the good things about us. And so we're just feeling this pressure from them to change and to change for them. And that doesn't feel good. And a lot of times when we're in that place, we'll be thinking things, well, don't let the doorknob hit you on the way out, or, this is, or maybe we'll get passive aggressive, like, yeah, I'll try and change because you want me to, but I'm going to make it as painful for you as I can. Or maybe we're, maybe we just feel just like we not thriving, like we are shrinking into ourselves, like we're not growing. All of these things happen when we feel a lack of acceptance from our intimate partner. And the same thing, and the same thing occurs with our clients. Our clients feel the same way. Not that I'm advocating having an intimate relationship with our clients. That's not what I'm saying. But as a metaphor, I think that the same thing happens. Our clients, when they don't feel that, then they may feel like they have to be passive aggressive, or maybe they feel thwarted, or maybe they are like, I don't want to work with you, and you get some discord, and it's like, there's this pushback. And so really what we want to do in our motivational interviewing is to have them feel accepted. And so I'll take you to that place too. We've all had times in our relationships where with an intimate partner where it's going really well. And that's the time when they're saying, when they accept us, warts and all. In fact, they like some of our warts. That's why they got with us in the first place. And they may still want us to change, but we don't have to. They're not forcing it, and they want us to change for us, so that we're happy. They want us to reach our goals, so that we're leading a fulfilling life, and they're supporting us in what we want to do, and so there's this autonomy piece where if we choose not to change, that's okay. But if we really wanted to, because they want to support us to be happy in our lives, and that's great. And then they have accurate empathy for why we bring the baggage we bring and what's going on, and they're affirming our strengths. That comes across a lot different, and oftentimes then we'll reach towards our goals. We'll kind of reach outward and grow, and it allows us to feel accepted for how we are, and provides a safe place for us to maybe even lean forward into a change. But we are not willing to do that if there is a lack of acceptance. That's not even on the table. So that's where that acceptance come in. This is a new one that's been added to the Spirit of MI, and this was added because there is a lot of people, there's been a lot of evidence behind motivational interviewing. Over 300 outcome studies of MI in a variety of different fields that show that it's effective at helping people make changes. People are using it, and started out in substance use, and it's gone into physical health and mental health and case management and employment settings like VR or supported employment. And there's so many studies that show it's effective. And so William Miller started getting these calls from salesmen, like car salesmen and other places, that are saying, okay, great, train all our sales staff in MI. and then, William Miller's going, you're missing the whole point. And there is MI is effective, but the whole point of it is this idea that we have the other person's best interests at heart. That we're actively promoting the other person's welfare, giving priority to the other person's needs, not primarily our own. And so that's the idea there. And there'll be some times where you're interacting with someone where it's clear that this is their priority, that we are giving their needs, their desires, their welfare the highest priority, and not our own. And then there'll be some times where those things overlap. And VR, that happens a lot. We're helping people resolve their ambivalence about going back to work, and that allows them to get off probation, and it's clear. There's all sorts of good things that can happen there. But then there'll be times when it's not clear, and we have to ask ourselves, am I using these skills that really can influence behavior change? Am I using them for that person's best interests, or am I using them for my own best interests? And if I'm not using it for their best interests, then I may choose not to do that, right? I'll be purposeful about that and think that through. So that's the idea here. I like this. MI is not done to or on someone at all. MI is done for and with a person. And that's how William Miller likes to describe that dilemma, that you're not going to use MI on someone, right, or do it to someone. MI is done for and with the person. It's this collaborative, compassionate skill set that has a lot of evidence that it works if done well. And then there's this last idea is this idea of evoking, that we're going to evoke from within, that we're going to evoke from within the person's own thoughts and ideas about change. We're assuming that they're like a deep well, and you don't put water in a well, you draw it out. Evocation is about evoking that which is already present, not installing something that's missing. And I like that a lot. So we're not telling people what to do, we're just evoking from within. So that assumption then is it moves away from I have what you need and I'm going to give it to you. Instead, you have what you need and together we'll find it. And so we're going to draw out and strengthen that person's motivation that's already present, even if dormant. So, and one of the assumptions then about MI is that ambivalence is normal. In fact, MI is meant to help people with ambivalence. So instead of fighting against it, which we often do through that writing reflex or in other ways, instead we work with it. And the way that we start to work with it is by paying attention to the person's intrinsic motivations and values and pay attention to what's going on internally for them. Again, that deep well, and asking questions, using good skill sets to help people talk about what's going on for them internally, and working with those things. And there's some other principles that we're not going to get too into right at this second, but there's some other general principles that we're going to work with motivational interviewing, and that is dancing with discord, which used to be called rolling with resistance, expressing empathy, developing discrepancy, and supporting self-efficacy. So those are some principles of MI that we'll be using in those four processes periodically. And when we get into that, we'll kind of talk a little bit about how and when that might be. So here we are. Here's the four processes of MI. And the four processes of MI are meant are for different ways you'll use your motivational interviewing strategies differently throughout the process. And the first process usually is building a relationship and engaging with someone, helping them trust you, responding when there's discord in your relationship in positive ways, using good empathy. So, and then the next process is then picking a goal, picking a focus or a target. You can describe that in a variety of different ways, but it's really hard to do motivational interviewing about 7 things at once. Motivational interviewing is a specific conversation about change around a specific target, around a specific thing. And so helping people pick what that target is, how that fits with their life goals overall, what is part of that focusing process. So you're helping them pick that target for the conversation. And once they picked it, they may be ambivalent about it. And if they're ambivalent about it, that's where the evocation process comes in. And they're wrestling with the pros and cons. If it's diet or exercise, then you're helping them wrestle with the feeling 2 ways about that. And you're purposeful around evoking more about why the person may want to change as opposed to why they're stuck. And so that's what often goes on in that evocation process. And, if you're thinking about work settings, a lot of times that looks like, I really want to go back to work, but I don't know if my disability will let me, or maybe getting a job coach would be great. I like the idea of getting some help, but the last thing I want to do is have people look at me weird if they're standing over my shoulder, or, there's all sorts of ways that ambivalence crops up in their work journey, return to work journey. And so your goal then is in the evocation process to help them wrestle with that and be strategic about how they talk about it and how you evoke from them. So that's the third process. And then the fourth process is this idea of planning, that you're helping them come up with their next steps. And in the VR process, that doesn't necessarily mean you're now initiating the big VR plan. It's just the next planning from an MI perspective is this idea that it's just the next step or two in their change process for a given target. For instance, maybe one of the things you've helped them wrestle with is taking care of their hygiene a little bit better, and maybe the next step for them is getting different shoes and taking a shower. Those things may be included in the big BR plan, but they may not too, and so it depends on what the target is. But that planning process really is about the next steps for whatever target it is that you've helped them resolve their ambivalence about. So there's engage, focus, evoke, and plan, and this diagram makes that look linear, but it really isn't necessarily. It's more like a foundation, where the first process is foundational to the next. It's really hard to do the process above without having the other one done, but you'll move back and forth as needed. So maybe you've done a great job of building that foundational relationship, and you've developed a clear direction and goals, and so you've got this good target, and maybe you're in the evocation process, but then something happens, and maybe the person gets triggered, and you have to go back and re-engage with them. So what you'll do is you'll go back to engagement and rebuild that relationship some more, and then refocus in again, and then you're back. And it's not always linear. You'll move back and forth as needed based on what the person is telling you and how they're responding to the conversation. And that's the idea. So that this is kind of a better way to look at it, that you'll revisit these processes as needed in a more circular fashion. So here we are. We're back to this slide around different things, and we've talked about the spirit of MI. We've hinted at these OR skills in the middle, and we've given a brief overview of the 4 processes on the right. And now let's jump into these OR skills in a more detailed way. These are things that we can practice all sorts of different ways. These are about helping people, talk themselves into changing. So we're going to use our OR skills in a variety of different ways. The first one here is open-ended questions. And open-ended questions, the idea behind these is to help people talk more. And so that's why closed questions, it's not that you don't use closed questions, it's just that you're going to use more open-ended questions than closed. And so the idea behind this is that if the whole point of motivational interviewing is to help the person talk themselves into change, you can't really do that if the person isn't talking. So if there's so asking a lot of closed-ended questions doesn't help with that. So instead you're going to use a lot of open-ended questions to help them talk themselves towards changing. And so they don't invite brief answers. Instead, you're asking more open-ended questions to invite more productive talk, and help them then be and then that allows you to be more purposeful in helping the other person talk themselves into changing. And so the client, you're going to want them to be doing more than half the talking, and you're going to be really emphasizing and using more open-ended questions than closed. Because we want to avoid this dynamic. It's really funny. There's a lot of research out there around what happens when clients don't get the opportunity to describe what's going on for them. And it's actually pretty funny. They've done research where they've recorded how long a client has talked in an interaction and how long a counselor has talked in an interaction, and then ask them after the helping session was over, did you find that to be a helpful session? Was that helpful for you? Did you like it? All of that stuff. And it was really interesting, when clients talked more, they thought that was a great session. And what was fascinating about it is when the counselors, rated those sessions, there was a tendency for them to rate the ones when the counselors talked more, and they thought those were the most effective sessions, and almost the exact opposite of the ones that the clients did. And so it's really interesting if all you're going for is greater client satisfaction, just allowing them to talk more is going to be a better bet. So, and then you can be even more purposeful in MI in how you're structuring that interview about when they're talking, what are they tending to talk more about. And the next one here then is affirming, that you're going to strategically try and reinforce things as you go along. Strengths, healthy coping skills, past successes, good intentions, core values. The idea is that you're going to try and make firm, you're going to try and affirm and make more firm these things as you go. And this is really helpful. Without these good, purposeful, strategic affirmations, you may be able to help someone really talk about and feel like it's important for them to change, but their confidence may stay low. Their ability to change once you get to the end of the interview may still be very low. And real strategic, genuine affirmations around some of these things as you go along is going to help with that and help build confidence that they can change, so that their importance to change is high, and their confidence, their ability to make that change is higher also, which increases the likelihood that they'll be able to. The next micro skill is this idea of reflective listening. This is the most important and challenging skill. It's really easy to learn reflections, but it takes a lot of practice to get really good at it. And so reflective listening is this idea that you're going to make a statement based on what someone has said, and you're going to reflect that back and be purposeful in just making that statement back to them. And it allows them to know that you're listening. It helps them feel understood, feel your empathy, and allows that to happen better. So these reflective statements are purposeful in that way. And if you were to record a normal session, a normal counseling session, what you'd find is that there'd be at least 10 questions to one reflection normally. Just the average, if you just take the average counselor and record their session, that's likely what you'd hear. But counselors competent in motivational interviewing, it's almost reversed. You're talking 2 or 3 reflections per question. And that's really a lot than what we practice in motivational interviewing is different reflections. We practice a lot of things, but one of the things that we do put some emphasis on is really practicing some of these different types of reflective statements. And reflective listening isn't necessarily a passive process. It's not something that you just kind of passively reflect any old thing that the person says. You get to choose what to respond to and what to ignore. And so it's a purposeful process where you're purposefully trying to reflect back in certain ways. So you're purposely reflecting. You can choose. It's almost as powerful what you choose not to reflect as what it is that you do choose to reflect. So that's a nice thing. I like thinking of it as this idea. I like learning how to do reflections as like the game Othello. It's a great metaphor. I'm dating myself a little bit, but it's this idea of the tagline for the game Othello is this idea that it takes a minute to learn, but a lifetime to master. And that's kind of what learning to do reflective listening is like. It just takes a minute to learn how to do reflections. It doesn't take long, but it takes a lifetime or a lot of practice to get really good at using reflective statements, about strategically using them in different ways to structure things, to guide the conversation, and to emphasize certain elements, and to get really good at it. And there's a lot of different strategies. But one of the basic ideas then is that there's a difference between simple reflection and complex reflection. A simple reflection is where is this idea that you're not departing too much from what the person has said. So again, a reflective statement is just a statement back to someone based on what they've said. So if they say something like, yeah, I'm really tired, and the idea of getting out there and submitting in my resume places, that's just overwhelming. And you reflect back to them, you're tired and thinking about doing that's just kind of overwhelming to think about. That's almost a parrot. It's pretty simple. You're not departing too far from what the person has said. That's a simple reflection. A complex reflection is where you're interpreting or you're taking a guess at some of the underlying meaning. And so a reflection is kind of like a mirror. A simple reflection is when you're looking at the mirror, when you're brushing your teeth, and you go, yep, that's me right there, right? That's a simple content. A more complex reflection might be where you're taking a guess or an inference based on what they've said. So using that same example, maybe you're inferring some things like you're so overwhelmed and you're wondering if VR is the right place for you. Or you're so overwhelmed and you're not liking this, and yet you're someone who's not quite ready to give up. You're inferring some things. You're taking a guess, a stab at what might be going on underneath for them, what their dilemma might be, and that's a more complex reflection. So, like our second picture here on the slide, that mirror is reflecting back to them how that kid imagines himself to be. Some of that unstated stuff. But again, you're not reflecting way out in the boondocks. It's still related. You're taking educated guesses based on what they've said and the context of the conversation. But that would be the difference between a simple and complex reflection. And there's a whole variety of strategic complex reflection. So here's the funny thing. Here's this really kind of ugly dude looking in the funny mirror, and he sees himself as a good-looking guy. But that's a similar idea, is that there's all sorts of different strategies. You're reflecting back purposefully. It's not just any old thing. You're being purposeful about it. And here's some traps to avoid. So here's our counselor and the client, and the counselor saying, so what I hear you saying is that you want to become physically violent with me because I keep repeating exactly what you're saying. And so there are some things in good reflective listening that we are going to try and avoid. One of those is sentence stems, things like, so what I hear you saying is, or it sounds like. It's okay if you use them periodically, but sometimes people will use them, or will use them, as crutches in our reflective statements, and we'll be saying things like, so what I hear you saying is you're angry about that, and then they're like, yeah, I'm angry about that. So what I hear you saying is, and then you do the next reflection and the next one, and you use it over and over again, and that it becomes a crutch, and it starts to have counselors go like, why are you therapizing, or clients say, why are you therapizing me, and stuff like that. So you're going to avoid those things, and then try and avoid parroting where you're repeating exactly what they're saying. Going to try and keep a neutral voice tone. So instead of having your voice tone go up at them, so let's just say that you reflect back around their desire to make a good impression at work. So maybe you say something like, you really want to make a good impression at work. That's your reflection. But you could inadvertently turn it into a question by going, you really want to make a good impression at work? Right? So your voice tone goes up at the end, and that turns it into a question. So instead, you're going to try and keep your voice tone down, avoid sarcasm, parroting, sentence stems, things like that. So in good reflective listening, you're going to try and avoid those things. And there's a lot, if you think about different types, and this isn't even all of them, but there's a lot of different strategies for using reflective statements. There's simple reflections, double-sided reflections, selective reflections, metaphors, emotional content, reframing, coming alongside, agreeing with a twist. There's things like continuing the paragraph. There's all sorts of different things, strategies, and I just put this in here to take down and give you a taste of where in-person training might go. You practice using these purposeful reflective statements to help steer conversations, to be able to help people feel heard and understood and empathized with. There's all sorts of ways and purposes for using these reflections. And in-person training, you really get into these nuances and practice them a lot, and it's a lot of fun. And then there's summaries. There's summarizing statements, and there's different strategies for these too. Sometimes you're collecting a theme and putting them together for the client, or linking different concepts together, or transitioning to a new topic. And so summaries are really where you're taking at least 3 distinct pieces of information from over time and putting them together. And you can do that in different ways and for different purposes. And so that's another thing that we practice more in person. And the idea here then is that we're using these OR skills to guide a conversation, to guide it so that other people talk themselves into changing, and increase their motivation for change. And we'll practice that in a variety of different ways. So now we're going to enter into, and we're going to transition in this next part of the activity. And what I'd like you to do is be ready at your keyboard. So hopefully all of you are hearing me and listening, and I want you to be ready at your keyboard, because I'm going to read a statement, and I'm going to have you then just type in a letter afterwards, just a letter, because the statement is going to be one of these different types of language here, and I'm going to walk through this. So I'm just cueing you here. I'm going to describe this slide, and then we'll move into the activity. What this slide is it's a description of different types of language that you might hear from a client. A discord is where there's something with you. There's something going on in your relationship. Usually it's kind of emotionally centered and relationally oriented. You know, it's discord. It's something's going on between you and the client. So in a VR, something you might hear from a VR client is, you just want me to get a job flipping burgers. You know, you don't really care about me. That might be something you hear from a client. That's a good indication of discord. If you can tell the type of language that you're hearing, it's easier to adjust your skills. So that would be discord language. And the other type of language you might hear is sustain and change talk. And we've hinted at this before too. Sustain talk is the reasons why they're stuck. You know, it's not about you or the system you represent. It's not about VR in general. It's just about their own internal ambivalence. And if that's what you're hearing, then that would be sustain talk. But I might lose my benefits. And usually sustain talk and change talk are closely linked. So you might hear the other side too, change. I need to provide for my family, but I might lose my benefits as a sustain, but I need to provide for my family might be change talk. So that these sustain and change talk are two sides of a coin. You know, one side is the reasons why they're stuck. The other side is the reasons why they want to change. If you're hearing sustain and change talk, then you know that you're going to be going into that evocation process. And then commitment is, I'm going to do it. You know, there's less ambivalence. They're saying that they really want to make that change. They've resolved kind of the yes but stuff, and they're more confident in their ability to do it. So they're going to be they're going to be more firm in their statements. It's going to be commitment, and so then you'll know that you'll move into those next kind of planning steps. So with that, that's discord, sustain, change, and commitment. And what we're going to do with this activity, so be ready with your keyboards, is you're going to type in, I'm going to read a statement, and all I want you to do is type in what you think this statement is. Is it discord, sustain, change, and commitment? If it's discord, it's going to be about you or the system you represent. If it's sustain, it's going to be just about the system, or it's going to be about their own internal ambivalence. If it's change, it's the reasons why they want to change. And if it's commitment, it's going to be more firm. And so here it is. And all I want you to do is in the question box, just type in what you think this is. So the statement is, you people are just here for the money. Is that resistance? That should say discord, but you people are just here for the money. Is that A, B, C, or D? Sustain, change, commitment, discord. A, absolutely. That is A. I had the old language in this slide for some reason that didn't go through, but yeah, this is absolutely A, or discord, right? You nailed it. Excellent, everybody. All right, perfect. Let's do the next one. I want to be able to set an example for my son. What do you think this is? Absolutely. Tiffany says C. And you nailed it. This is the reasons why they may want to go back to work. Excellent, Sonia. Perfect. This is how you start listening. If you can hear stuff like this, you can start to structure the conversation so the person hears themselves say more of it. So excellent. I want to be able to set an example for my son. How about this one? Who are you to tell me what to do? What do you think this one might be? Excellent. This is A again. You guys really nailed that. So yeah, this is discord or resistance is the old language. Excellent. I don't even know if I want to go to work if I'll lose my benefits. What do you think this one is? Discord or resistance would be it's about you or the system. Sustain would be their own internal ambivalence, reasons why they wouldn't want to change. Changes, reasons that change. Commitment is that they're going to. Excellent. So we have several people saying B. You have nailed it yet again. So that's the idea there. That's an own internal reason to stay the same. How about this one? I can be more creative when I smoke. If the target is smoking, what might this be? Nice. You guys nailed that again. So again, yeah, it's not about you. It would be discord if they were like, if they said this like, so Tiffany's laughing. Ha ha ha! It's C. That's hilarious. Yeah, they want to change. She's being facetious around that their goal is to be more creative and smoke a lot, right? Nice. If the target was quitting this though, then yeah, you're right. It would be B. That would be sustained talk, and it would be discord if it was if they were saying, so get off my back about this, right? Nice. So let's do the next one. I'm going to do this. What do you think this one is? D. Nice. Right on, everybody. You guys nailed this. What about this one? You don't really care about me. Yeah, that's discord. You guys nailed that one as well. It's really about their distrust that you're in this for them, right? That they really want you to care about them. So it's about you. Excellent. This is something I've thought about for a long time. I think I'm ready to start tomorrow. Yeah, a lot of people are saying C, a couple D. Why would this maybe be more C than it might be D? Um, One of the reasons might be is that the person is saying, I think. It's still kind of squishy, right? So it's not quite D, and that's okay, right? It's getting real close, and there's some strategies in MI we might use to help them push them over to the other side. Not push them, but help them move to that other side. Yeah, exactly. Nice, Kelly. I think you nailed it. So that's what makes it more of a C. Perfect. Have you ever had a disability? What do you think this one might be? Nice. Yeah. A lot of people are saying A, some people saying B. Um, but one way to kind of guess, kind of do that decision tree in your head is to ask yourself, who is this about? Who are they? And really what they're asking is about you and and what are they ultimately, what's their underlying concern here? Well, it's, are you going to be able to understand me? Do you have a disability also? That's really what that's about. So that makes it more of an A or a discordant thing because it's really about you. Are you really going to get what it's like? And that would make it more likely more of an A, and so that helps a little bit. What I really like from everyone's responses, though, is that you can tell that it's further up there, that it's resistance, sustain, up in that direction, and that's a good thing that you can tell that. All right, let's go. I'm already going to dress up nice. I don't want to have to cut my mohawk too. Nice. Yeah, there's a lot of sustain in there. And there's also an opportunity in here to elicit some change talk. They're already doing some positive things. That's an opportunity here. Uh, but yeah, primarily that's some sustained talk there. I don't want to have to cut my mohawk. Nice. I've just always thought of myself as someone who works. I've just always thought of myself as someone who works. Nice, Miley C. Their identity is wrapped up in their work. Tiffany's saying maybe it might even be a D. Yeah, C for Anita. Yeah, it's heading in that direction, right? But context matters. I know one person put a B. How they say that voice tone may make it something else. But if we're just taking it at the surface, for sure, or it may tend to be more along that change side, right? They've always thought of themselves as someone who works, who has a job, and now that they don't have one, it just doesn't feel as good. So it's a reason why they may want to work, is because that's part of who they view themselves as. So that would make that more of a change talk. All right, I'm going to skip through a lot of these and just head to the last part because I want to leave room for some questions. And what I just kind of want to end this with a couple of different concepts in more detail. One of the things that we'll give a sneak peek about what this might look like with more in-person MI training is that there's a lot more interaction. It's fun. It's less of this kind of just talking and PowerPoint thing. It's a lot of activities, a lot of in-the-moment stuff where you're learning skill sets. And some of the things that you're going to learn is more about the MI spirit and principles, practicing those OR skills strategically, and lots of activities around that. And you'll also have activities around each of those 4 processes in detail. How would you go about structuring the conversation in engagement? How would you go about having that conversation and collaboratively helping someone focus in on a target? How would you help someone evoke from within and talk more about why they want to change as opposed to why they're stuck? How could you transition into helping someone how do you help someone capitalize on the momentum you built in your conversation and move into some steps? And there's lots of practice. We'll put it all together. We'll do all sorts of stuff in that way. And so that's what the skills-based, as opposed to just kind of, what's MI about and a taste of MI training is going to look like. So that's that idea there. Another concept that I'll end you with is that this idea of eliciting change talk. This is this idea that there are ways to structure the conversation using your micro skills and your OR skills to purposely structure the conversation towards change, where you're purposely evoking within and doing that. And I love this comment from Terry Moyers. She says this: early in the MI session, the skill is often to discern an array of change talk, like spotting a lighthouse in a storm or detecting a signal within noise. It is not necessary to eliminate the storm or the noise, just follow the signal. And I really like that concept, where sometimes we fall into that writing reflex and we're trying to problem solve the noise. And what happens then is that we problem solve it and we fix it and we do everything that we can, and we fall into this wrestling match, and we finally get that one thing resolved, and then the client just throws another barrier into our lap, and now we're wrestling that one, and then the next one, and then the next one. Whereas what this kind of indicates is that the timing for that is off. Part of the reason why that keeps happening is the person's still ambivalent, and so as soon as the one thing gets resolved, it's just natural then for them to throw the next barrier in the mix. And so what MI does is by paying attention to that ray of change talk, that signal within noise, and then helping them tell you more about that, that increases their internal motivation, helps them resolve their ambivalence, and so that when you move into that planning process, they're more likely to go there. And so you follow that signal instead of eliminating the noise. It's impossible to eliminate the storm. So what we'll do is we'll follow the signal. Here's this last idea. One reason it is possible to keep on learning and improving one's skills in motivational interviewing is that immediate expert feedback is continuously available. It is available from those you serve. And that's really nice that by paying attention to the language of the client, how they respond to what you're saying, you're able to continually improve your skill set. So let's open it up for some questions here, and we'll see what we do for this last 10 minutes here. So let me see if I can get this question. For some reason, it's not showing up well here. Hold on. Okay, so what would we do if they give off no signal? The consumer is just shutting down because they feel as if they can't get to their goal. Oh, what an excellent question. And part of that is paying attention to what process you're in. Sometimes people feel like they don't trust you enough to become completely honest about that dilemma that they're having, or maybe they're really shut down, or maybe you're not getting some of that. And what that really indicates is being in the evocation process, it may be premature, that you're not evoking change talk. There isn't a whole lot of change talk to evoke yet. And so what you're doing is you're going into those earlier processes, and you're really staying in that engagement and focusing modes, and probably initially a lot more on that engagement side of building trust, doing some of that engagement and listening really carefully to see if they give you openings. And maybe we are on the wrong target. Maybe we need to really help them focus in about what their goals are, and helping them prioritize some of those things. So there's different things, helping them discuss what they want out of their life, what do they want ultimately, and how does the current behavior fit or conflict with that. I mean, there's all sorts of different ways that we can strategize with folks early on, and that's what these in-person trainings are going to help with, around when do I really drop into each one of these 4 processes, when do I really and how do I use them more strategically and practice those? So that's an excellent question, and it points us to some of the practice of motivational interviewing in each one of these 4 processes, so that when we get that dynamic, like what you suggest, where we're not getting a lot of change talk, maybe they're kind of beat down a little bit, maybe they're not sure if this is the right goal for them, and they're not even describing to you that dilemma, that you can use some of those other processes. However, if they're giving you even a little bit, that gives you some opportunity to strategically ask questions about and reflect into it. So let's just hypothetically say that they actually told you the statement that you just said, and maybe they feel that they can't get to their goal. So maybe they tell you something like, I really want to do this, but I don't think I can. I think it's unrealistic for me. What they've just given you is some change talk and sustain talk. The change talk is, I really want to do this. And you can ask questions about that to increase importance for them, help them really hear themselves say. And so you might ask a question, well, tell me more. So you really want to do this. Tell me more about that. Why do you want to do this? Why? And asking them those questions, and then you listen and deepen that. Or you may use a reflection. So you may say, so part of you is really frustrated about your ability to do it, and yet there's this other part of you that's saying that you want to. And so you're purposely reflecting in that direction in the hopes that they'll tell you more about it. There's other strategies too around building confidence, which we could get into in person also. And Tiffany's asking a question. Let me see. Is there another question? For some reason, it's not showing up here. So Andrew, for some reason, I'm not hearing this. Can you read that question to me or seeing it?
I think that was one that you just answered.
Okay, there isn't a different one. Okay, good. I was getting a new signal that said that there was a question, and I thought there was another one. Well, excellent. I'm glad that I answered it, and I'm not missing one, so that's good. So I appreciate this, everyone. I appreciate your willingness to, on the fly, answer those types of statements with, the type of language you think it is. I appreciate you being in here and signing up for this, and it was good to be here with you for a little bit. If you have any questions, you can certainly email, and Andrew is going to share with you a little bit about how you might go about doing that through the VR development group. And if you're interested in any other things, certainly, send those emails in. Anyway, I appreciate this. If there's, from an MI perspective, really, you are in that place where there's continual, no matter how much training you get, there's always continual ways that you can grow. And one of those ways is by really paying attention to that client in front of you, listening to their language, and being purposeful in how you respond and learning from that. And so I'll leave us there, and I hope all of you have a great time. And I'll turn the time back over to Andrew.
All right, thank you, Trevor, for a wonderful session. Thanks for everybody who chose to participate today. Thought that went very well. And on behalf of the VR development group, we appreciate you tuning in today. Just a quick note, you will be emailed CRC credits. Your paperwork will be emailed to you shortly after this webinar ends. If you are looking for any material related to this session, please make sure to check out where the handouts are on the webinar control panel. That's where the download is. That will have slides pertaining to the presentation today. And once again, just want to thank you, Trevor, and thanks again for showing up. This recording will be available to you as well. It'll be attached to an email sent to you shortly after this webinar ends. Thanks again.